page 22 of your 5-year forecast, you do sort of the same math, right? At the end of 2022, you got a $3 million deficit, right? So if I needed $9 million, bringing in, that's good.
Well, so let's just model it. So let's model it here. So this is the forecast. So this is how we do our forecasting. It's a massive Excel spreadsheet. And what you can see down at the bottom is line item 10.01. That is fiscal year 23.
Make sure that we know the difference between fiscal year and year.
And
I mean, in those categories.
School year.
Yeah.
So if we look at it right now, if we model in 9.95 mils, that's where you're ending up. And actually, I took something out. Getting to about $8.5 million at the end of fiscal year 23. So that would be in July, end of June, and then you got to make it to December to get more revenue.
Hey, Kevin, one thought here is,
Sure.
Since you lost the revenue in 2020, and if you look at the forecast right now, if you look at the expenditures for 2020, there's obviously a gap. So could we look at this in 2 steps? Step number 1 is balance the budget in 2020. Okay, that solves all delays of revenue. And then move forward with, once you've balanced the budget, what's an acceptable, what are the needs going forward based on the forecast? And then what does that translate into millage? If I did the math right, if you're able to balance 2020 out, and that would require coming up with 3.9 million in choices, okay? And then if you just project that out forward, 3.9 divided by 0.9 or a million, that would cut the millage required from 10 down to 6.
Sure.
Okay, so one way we could look at this is have a conversation about how you balance it in 2020. What choices would need to be made?
I mean, we could do that.
Okay,
That'd be pretty hefty, but we could look at.
but start. I mean, I understand. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's just a conversation around choices. It's your guys' decision on whether or not you want to execute those choices. Okay, but that would square us on this delay. Okay, because I think people are getting hung up on the delay. And one thing to simplify the delay is, okay, just square 2020. Okay, that's within your control. And then it's very easy for people to then take your forecast, say, okay, do I believe your forecast or don't I? That equals this millage, and then go from there.
So the only thing I would say about trying to balance 20 at this point, what you're running into is the bulk of our expenses are people related.
Sure.
So if you're not necessarily touching staff,
I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just saying. Yeah, no, I
appreciate it. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
so
you gotta
you'd be cutting out almost half of the non-payroll expenses, potentially.
Yeah.
And the reality is a lot of those, some of those we just can't touch. So, I mean, it's a good place to start.
So what, in the $54 million, what's not touchable?
So I would say that's going back more towards, I would say, so Dr. Kraus and some of the instructional leaders should probably touch upon that. So I'm just I'm not just, but I'm the money guy, so like, we can figure out the numbers at
Can
the
we
same
say things
time.
like turn the lights on? You have to turn the lights on.
Yeah,
You can't touch that money. You have to turn the lights on.
But so, like, we can talk about some of those things as to what are opportunities, what are potentials. That would be outside of my area specifically. So I would turn it over to Dr. Kraus if you wanted to talk about anything.
No, but I'm sorry
No,
to
go ahead.
interrupt, but, because like at the end of the day, if it's untouchable and we can't do anything about it, you're basically saying, like, so what do we do? And what I would say, and this might not be the right approach, but the administration, everything is touchable. The question is just when, you know? So we could either take an approach that nothing's touchable and I can't do with that, or I can take the approach that no, everything is touchable. And then it's up to this, you know, this committee and your staff to say, is that what I want? I'm just trying to get to, like, put the choices on the table. And how I simplistically think about it is 2 steps. Balance 2020 to address the delay in funding that, you know, there was an assumption made on the last 5-year forecast that funding would be available. Balance it. Here are the choices. Is that what we want to go do? And if not, then we get into the conversation, okay, well, what's an alternative?
Well, can I add to that? So maybe to build on that thought, what are the scenarios? In other words, if we don't pass a levy in March or November or whatever, there's 0 additional increases. Something's going to happen, right? You are on an unsustainable path right now. So what happens? What's that scenario look like? I'm not saying I'm in favor of that, I'm not. But what happens? And in fact, I'd like to see several scenarios. If we pass a 3 mil levy, this happens. If we pass a 7 mil, whatever. You tell me what the numbers are. What are the scenarios?
Well, I mean, so that's, I would say, if you're looking at 995 as your high water mark, so your ceiling, if you're working down from there from a millage standpoint.
Well, yeah, I guess the other thing sticking in the back of my mind is, okay, we're dealing just with operating expenses right now. The building issue that was put on this last levy is still sitting there, right? And I know there's different views in the community about whether we should do this or that, right? I get it. But I think there is a base level of support saying, listen, the elementary and primary schools are, what, 80 some odd years old? At some point, those are going to have to get dealt with. We can't just keep sticking our head in the sand about that. So I'm thinking, when's the other shoe going to drop also, right? So you're going to deal with the operating expense issue, but you still got the building issue. So I'm going to step back and say, what's the plan? And more importantly, what are the potential plans? So we can do this, or we can, give me 5 different scenarios. Whatever, you tell me, you guys are close to the numbers. What's it look like? What are the options?
Kevin, can I ask a question about options? What does an income tax? I came from, when I moved down here from the Dayton area, we had a school district income tax. Fairborn City Schools had a 0.5%, a very light demographic school district. Troy had a 1.5%. Have we explored that? What does that look like in this community? Because I know we don't have industry here to support our property tax, so is that an option?
Yeah, so we explored that option with the last levy. We did have discussions about it. It was not something that was presented going forward. I think it's still something that we do need to continue to talk about. I would say my concerns currently with an income tax is the reality is what you're talking about is we have to get something done. And in my profession, when you start moving away from property tax, now starting to talk about income tax, if it was really difficult to try to explain this last levy, there is some concerns that if we suddenly just pivot and start talking about a different revenue source, just for right now, I would have some serious concerns about not being able to pass a levy.
Is that even an option for those of us who live in the townships?
Yes, so a school district.
Can you levy an income tax in a township?
Yes, so school district income tax affects the community members.
Okay.
So if you work, so if you work in a district that has school district income tax, you do not pay that income tax because it doesn't benefit you as somebody who works in a district because you don't live in that district. If you live in the school district, you would be charged.
Okay, got it.
Correct.
I was just thinking with the number of apartments that we've recently added in town, that it may be something that could help us moving forward.
I think it's definitely something to look at in the future, and, it's obviously the board's decision. I would say the challenge too is that there's two separate types of income taxes. So there's an earned income tax or a regular income tax. When I talk to a lot of people on the phone, what they obviously would have preferred in their current state was an earned income tax. And the earned income tax, it has to be that much higher to be able to make up the difference. So an earned income tax won't necessarily tax fixed incomes, things like that. My concern really is, the school district has to figure something out. We should probably continue to have that conversation going forward. I don't know if it's the right solution right now. I think there's a lot of research that would need to be done in the meantime. But I think it's still something to keep on the table. I just don't know, like, in the next 2 weeks. So. I know that's right.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Kevin, I would just also say that the committee should be aware that the board has, at least 2 different occasions in the past, done some serious work on an income tax, and had a rather large committee such as this at one point for income tax, and then, as you said, at the last levy did some investigation into income tax, and have met thus far with quite a bit of resistance from the community to move to an income tax. Part of that, I think, is the last time that we looked at it, there were a couple of districts in the area that had income taxes that were also having to come back for more property tax as well. In other words, the income tax, which was originally billed years ago as pass an income tax and you don't have to do any more property tax. You'll just take care of it because income grows. Well, we all know that didn't happen in 2008, so that was a problem. So it's not quite as simple as it used to be when they said, pass an income tax, you solve your problems. You don't have to ask for any more property tax. That has not been the case for some districts where they've got an income tax. They've either had to come back for more income tax or they've come back for more property tax because the income tax has not been providing what they needed. And then, as you said, there's the issue between the earned and the straight income tax. There's also a problem with collections. So even if we were able to say this committee recommended or the community recommended that we look at an income tax in 2020 instead of a property tax, there's a much further implication for collection because that collection takes much longer than property tax does. So I can't remember the percentages now, but you would be looking at a passage in 2020 of collection of only a certain portion in 2021. You wouldn't have full collection till another year, as I understand it.
So, I mean, I think, and I hear the scenarios conversation, I don't know if it's worth more of a conversation at this point, like amongst each other or in the greater group of, the reality is we got to figure out if we're doing March or if we're doing November. We have some pretty quick timeframes to turn that around. Again, there are implications to both. What are people's thoughts? What are people's thoughts on that?
I think we need to talk about what cuts would come out so that we can decide what a village would be. And I think we need to have those conversations about trade-offs of what would come out and to see if we can reduce it down some for what the ask would be.
I think there has to be big communication to the community, to those points, why this new ask. Because clearly they didn't support the old operating and the bond and the permanent. Dr. Lorenz, just because I know you're pretty senior with the board, out of the box thinking with the income tax, what about like hybrid schools? I mean, we're talking brick and mortar, we want to offer more classes. Like, have we ever investigated more of this online option? We're sending people to CCP, so we're already doing like different digital schools or sending them off campus to go someplace else. We're just like a hybrid model.
Just a quick answer to the College Credit Plus. In
Yeah.
fact, College Credit Plus is coming back more and more to the district than just sending people out to College Credit
I
Plus.
heard her speak about that.
I mean,
at the meeting.
I was a College Credit Plus mentor at the University of Cincinnati, and they have completely done away with the on-campus language programs for College Credit Plus, for world languages. They're doing those on campuses, and they're getting out of that business. So a lot of it is coming back to the high schools instead of sending students out. As to the hybrid and the notion of, making huge changes in how we do business in schools, that's certainly not something that can be investigated for a 2020, whether it's March or November. I think there are many issues with that as to, whether the community would support having their students be home a certain amount of the time, that kind of thing. I think that's the problem with the hybrid.
And there's a lot of states that are doing it. I mean, I don't know, we don't have commercial, we're landlocked. I mean, I just feel like a lot of it's adding up to, colleges obviously have a lot of online. So, I mean, once they leave us, we're trying to prepare them for tomorrow. They're going to do different, semester online classes from their December to January. My physical therapist is doing like a full semester at UC online. I don't know, it's just something to throw out there, and you're the educators, and, we're talking about cutting operating, cutting buildings, teachers. I mean, we could offer more to the community if we had more online opportunities that wouldn't require all the infrastructure and the operating that goes with that.
It might very well help at the high school level. It's certainly not going to help us at the
There's a lot of studies that talk about
elementary
even at
level.
the middle school. There's talk even K through 8. A lot of different models with, who comes to school on certain days, what work they do. Heck, we tried like blizzard bags for like a little pocket of time because we didn't want to lose like school days. So, I mean, I felt like the concept has been out there kicking around a little bit, just.
That feels like something huge though, right? Like if we're talking
Clearly not
about
for the operating levy, but I mean, the community's not happy.
So if our
At some
goals
point,
are
we-
to think about the operating levy, that might be
Listen,
like a parking lot
Make
thing,
no
right?
mistake that I know
Uh-huh.
why we're here, but the community can only be tapped so much. I mean, we're cringing that we're not gonna pass this operating levy.
Sure. I mean, I think it's fair points, Tammy. I think there is an economic conversation though of folks, if they can afford to be home with their kids if they're not going to be in school. So I think there's just like we talked about, can folks feeling there's a different economic challenge with that, of not everybody can afford to have a parent home if
Or,
they're not
the
going to
older
be.
they are, they don't have to be. too.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
I
mean,
it's definitely something to ideate on. I think there's a lot of things to think about.
Kevin, a quick question for you. Reevaluations of property happen this year, or 2020? Is that only Hamilton County or is that every county? Do you know?
Hamilton and Claremont.
And-
So, Hamilton is triennial update, Claremont is reappraisal.
If something were passed in March, say it's, I don't know, pick a number 5, and then properties are reevaluated.
Good number.
Should I have said 20, just to make it like we don't talk? Not a real number. And then properties are reevaluated after that's passed. Is then the millage recalculated when collected? So it's effectively a lower millage?
Yeah, so that's the reduction factor.
Okay.
So although homes would be, most likely at this point, homes would be reappraised and triennial updates at a higher value, the millage would effectively go down, your effective tax rate would decrease essentially.
So funding's flat.
Yes.
Got it.
Right.
And what property values have gone up historically, do you know, when they've done the reevaluation? Like, I mean, our pool?
Like, have they, or?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's gone up, is it 6%, I think, something
Yeah,
like
it's not
that?
the exact, I can show you, unfortunately, it's gonna show some bad numbers too.
Yeah, but Ned, why are you asking the question? What difference does it make? If the property
It's a
values go
flat
up,
number.
the reduction factor is just going to cut it back. So you're right where you started, right?
You were right where you started in terms of dollar value, yeah.
Are you talking about where you would actually start? Because it gets reassessed, so it'll get reassessed at a higher level, and then the levy is assessed at the higher level?
No, I was just making sure that was how it was collected.
Okay.
That way.
Historically, they have gone up over time. This is the last 10 years. Not to bring up any bad memories, but it obviously brings up some bad years. So that you see here, I don't know if you can, probably can't. So those are your total valuations in the district from 2007 through 2018. And you can see the negatives in there. So that would have been, 2011 would have been triennial updates, reappraisal.
So what do we need to do moving forward? Like, I know some people came in with ideas about kind of cuts that should be made, or like what our target should be in terms of millage. Like, is our decision, do we stick with the 9.9 number and we talk about that? I've also heard the number 6.9. So do we look at that, and if we're gonna put a 6.9, this is what it means in terms of cuts. Like, I feel like we need to figure out what our next step is. And
So
I'm not
we
sure
can-
how we do that.
So I like the word scenarios that I've heard over here. And so a couple of things about scenarios when we're talking about staffing and speed. And so we talk about a scenario. I'm not suggesting that I'm done with the scenario work. I'm trying to listen and capture how to move forward. So a scenario would be, so $500,000, so $450,000 looks like 5 teachers or 12 classified staff. So if you were going to be scenarios. What we can't do, like, we just have to talk about, are we okay with that? Now, we can tell you, like, 5, we're calling that away from staffing or away from the program, and 12 starts to eliminate programs. We can start to do that, but we can't talk specifically about, oh, that's 5 teachers, 1 at every grade level, because those are people, and we have to message things internally. We certainly don't want to be talking about specific cuts to the community without talking to our staff, about those things. So scenarios when we're talking about staffing are very general, looking like things like, are we comfortable with 5 staff, 5 certified staff, as an example. And we can come on the 3rd with some ideas about how impactful some of that would be. But understand, those scenarios when we're talking about people are not going to be high specificity about where they are.
I don't think they need to be.
Right, I'm just forewarning, like, that's just going to be a protection from a matter of, now it would be, let's say we have those conversations and we're like, yes, all in, let's do March. So we have to, and we've decided that it's this millage, and we're going to go forward and communicate that. We'll then do the work and start communicating with staff. People would know what those cuts were prior to a March vote. We just have to have time to talk to people internally for that lag. Does that make sense?
Kevin, another question for you. So I'm back to the financial plan. I want to make sure I'm reading this right. So June 30th of next year, 2020, the district has $11.3 million in the bank.
Yes.
Is that correct? And then, obviously, June of 2021, 5.2. And then the following year, we fall off the cliff. Okay.
No, but I think that's important, because how I was reading this, one choice you could make, Julia, you brought it up earlier, is if you need $9 million in the bank for cash, if that's the minimum requirement, you've got $2.3 million to play with. So you need 3.9 to balance it. You could reduce your cash reserves, to get a significant portion of that, and then you have to figure another, then the tough choices come in. Because that's what your slide said, was I need $9 million. Okay, so I understand that I'm well versed on the difference between a cash statement and a P&L statement, but you have a choice that's on the table that you could reduce your cash needs by the end of 2020. That could be a choice that you make.
For 1 year, John.
For 1 year, but then you put the levy on March.
Spot on. It's a combination I
It's a
made
combination.
before.
You gotta do all
It's your
three.
starting point,
Right.
If your
Right.
starting point went up $1.5 million, for example, right? And then you're saying I'm going up 4 or 5% from there. Reduce your starting point by $1.5 million or $2 million, and it doesn't have to be all teachers, obviously, because we've identified a few other places where money is being spent. Look at those non-teacher aspects. And one of the things I've asked for, and Kevin has been great in getting me information, but what has been the head count by department okay, for the last 5 years, right? It's not all teachers, right? There's some admin, there's some secretaries, there's other positions, possibly, I'm guessing, that have been added, but I don't have visibility to that. You guys have visibility to that. So when you talk about headcount reduction, it doesn't necessarily just need to be teachers and certified, it could be other non-teaching type of positions. And then I brought up the point about Forward Edge, right? And them as a consultant, basically with services.
Now we're cooking with gas. Yeah, we are.